At 77 years old, Lionel Richie just walked out onto a stage in front of 10,000 people, plugged into one of the most grueling touring schedules of his entire career, and collapsed mid-show. And the moment it happened, people all over the internet asked the same question: how has this man been doing this for 50 years, and what exactly does his celebrity longevity routine look like at this age? That is what this video is about. Not speculation, not tabloid rumors, the actual, documented first-person account of how Lionel Richie eats, trains, recovers, and has survived everything his career has thrown at him. From a mysterious vocal crisis in the 1990s that nearly ended everything, to a hip replacement, a knee surgery, a memoir that cracked the New York Times bestseller list, and a 2026 tour that would challenge someone 30 years younger. This is the Commodores diet, and it is a lot more specific than you might think. Lionel Brockman Richie Junior was born on June 20th, 1949 in Tuskegee, Alabama. He came up in the 1970s as a songwriter and co-lead singer of the Motown group the Commodores, and went on to sell more than 125 million albums worldwide. He has an Oscar, a Golden Globe, 4 Grammy Awards, the Gershwin Prize for Popular Song from the Library of Congress, and a spot in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, where he was inducted in 2022. As of June 26, 2026, he is sitting at an estimated $200 million in net worth, judging American Idol for his 7th consecutive season, and recovering from a health scare that shook his fans to their core. But to understand what happened in St. Paul, Minnesota on June 24, 2026, you have to go back, way back. Because the habits Lionel Richie has built over the course of his career, the things he eats, the things he avoids, the people he trusts with his body, all of it has a history. And that history starts with one of the most frightening periods of his life. It was the early 1990s, and Lionel Richie was at the top of his game and quietly falling apart. He was going through a brutal divorce from his first wife, Brenda Harvey. His father, Lionel Richie Sr., a U.S. Army systems analyst who had been his anchor his entire life, passed away in 1990 at the age of 75. And somewhere in the middle of all of that grief and chaos, his voice started to go. Not gradually, not in a way that gave him time to adjust. He would wake up and something just felt wrong in his throat. And then it kept getting worse. He went to doctors, they operated, it did not work. He went back, they operated again. 4 surgeries in 4 years, and none of them solved the problem. The doctors eventually told him something no singer ever wants to hear. He might lose his voice entirely, he might never perform again. He told People magazine in February of 2022 that it was, quote, about as close as you ever would have come to a nervous breakdown, end quote. And in an interview with Piers Morgan in 2012, he described what that kind of threat does to a person's sense of self. Quote, I have been through 4 surgeries, vocal surgeries. And while you're sitting there in silence, the question comes up, who am I? Who am I really without this voice? Who are you really? And as an artist, you are defined by your voice, end quote. What finally cracked the case was not a conventional doctor. It was a holistic practitioner who looked at Lionel Richie's lifestyle and asked him a simple question. What are you eating before you go to bed? The answer was ice cream, protein powder, weight-gaining shakes, all of it going down right before he lay down to sleep. And the holistic doctor's diagnosis was straightforward: laryngopharyngeal reflux, or LPR, a specific form of acid reflux that sends stomach acid all the way up into the larynx, triggered by those late-night foods and damaging his vocal cords from below. Any ENT specialist will tell you that LPR is one of the most underdiagnosed threats to vocal health in performing artists, because the damage happens silently, without the classic heartburn symptoms. All 4 conventional surgeries had been treating the symptom. Nobody had thought to ask about what he was putting in his body. A basic vocal hygiene protocol, the kind that voice specialists now consider standard care for professional singers, would have caught this years earlier. He later described the moment of diagnosis as being, quote, the happiest brother on the planet, end quote, because the fix was not another surgery. The fix was changing what he ate at night. He stopped, the LPR resolved, his voice came back. And Lionel Richie learned a lesson in his 40s that would quietly shape the next 3 decades of how he treated his body. Food is not separate from performance. Food is performance. Fast forward to the version of Lionel Richie that most of the world sees today, the American Idol judge with the mysteriously youthful face, the man who showed up at the 98th Academy Awards earlier this year and sent social media into a frenzy over his appearance, and you see someone who has built a very specific, very deliberate daily system around his health. It is the kind of thing the longevity science community would recognize immediately. Not biohacking in the Brian Johnson sense, no NAD+ infusions or continuous glucose monitors, but a disciplined, consistency-based approach to health span that most performance coaches would call textbook. The most famous version of that system is something Richie has said publicly on multiple occasions, including at the 8th Annual Hollywood Beauty Awards and in a May 2023 interview with the Daily Mail. His formula, in his own words, water, sleep, and sweat. Not too much red meat. And then, with the kind of delivery that only Lionel Richie can pull off, he added that there is one more thing on the list that is good for the heart, and left the audience to fill in the blank themselves. But here is where the real story lives, because that quote is the headline, not the full picture. When Marie Claire sat down with Richie in August of 2023 for their Beauty Around the Clock feature, they got something that most outlets never bother to pull: the actual, granular, day-by-day breakdown of what he eats and why. And the first thing Richie told them was something that reframes the entire conversation. He said, and this is in his words, "I am one person on the road and another person off the road." That distinction matters enormously, because Lionel Richie is not running some general wellness philosophy. He is running two separate nutritional systems calibrated to two completely different physical demands. Sports medicine practitioners have a name for this kind of periodized eating, matching your fuel intake to your activity load. Most people never do it with any consistency. Richie has been doing it instinctively for decades. When he is off tour, he wakes up when he wakes up, moves less, and treats carbohydrates with real suspicion. Quote, "When I'm off the road, carbs are not my friend because it's all sugar," end quote. His off-tour mornings start with warm lemon water, which he described as a way to flush the system and, as he put it, clean the palate before you start the next day. He thinks of the stomach as a refrigerator left open overnight, and the warm lemon water is how he resets it. What he is describing functionally is an extended overnight fast followed by a low stimulation morning ritual, a structure that aligns closely with what circadian rhythm researchers flag as optimal for metabolic health. Off tour, his exercise comes down to about 20 minutes on the elliptical, stretching and regular sessions with a physical therapist who does weight work and what Richie called making sure all the toxins come out through massage. And then there is the on-tour version of the man. When Lionel Richie is performing on a stage almost every night, the nutritional calculus shifts completely. He has described the physical reality of his show with remarkable clarity. 2 hours of singing and moving. That is the job. 2 hours every night, under stage lights, in front of thousands of people, at 77 years old. There is no shortcut for that. You have to be in shape, you have to be fueled. Touring musician health at this level is a legitimate sports medicine discipline, and the performance stamina required to sustain a 26-day run is physiologically comparable to what endurance athletes manage during a competitive season. His on-tour days do not start early. After a show, he is winding down late so his mornings can run toward 11 a.m. He opens with that same warm lemon water and then moves into protein. Steak and eggs or some kind of lean protein, chicken, fish, eggs paired with oatmeal and vegetables. That foundation holds him through the day, and then 1 to 2 hours before showtime, he switches. Carbs come in, because on the road, in his words, carbs are his friend. They are fuel for the machine that is about to go on stage. His evening wind down, once the show is done and the adrenaline is bleeding off, is something he has described as a great glass of red wine or chamomile tea. And you can hear in that the echo of the lesson from the 1990s. Late night eating, especially anything heavy, is gone from his life. The ice cream and the protein shakes that nearly cost him his voice 30 years ago, he does not revisit that territory. The rest of his on-tour health requirements, as he has described them, come down to sleep, food, water, and access to a doctor. Quote, "Besides getting great sleep, great food, and lots of water, the other thing people on tour will say more times than anything else is, 'I need a doctor,'" end quote. That is not a complaint from Richie. That is him acknowledging honestly what sustained touring at his age actually looks like from the inside. Now, the public record does not include a named nutritionist or personal chef in Lionel Richie's inner circle. That absence is worth naming because a lot of coverage implies there is some wellness team pulling the strings behind the scenes. There is not a documented one. What is documented is a named dermatologist, Dr. Harold Lancer of Beverly Hills, a longtime family doctor who Richie has described in interviews with Marie Claire as the source of the skincare products he uses every day. His sensitive skin requires careful management, and Dr. Lancer has been his answer to that for years. That relationship is real. A secret nutritionist is not something the record supports. What did shape his philosophy around his appearance, however, is someone who most people would not expect to be on the list: Elizabeth Taylor. Richie has told this story more than once. Every time he was in her presence, Taylor would look at him and say the same thing. Quote, "What are you doing for your skin, Lionel? What are you doing for your skin?" End quote. He has described her as someone who understood that the outside of a person is a reflection of how they treat themselves on the inside, and that the discipline of caring for your appearance, your hydration, your skin, your rest, all of it comes from the same place. That informal mentorship from one of Hollywood's most iconic figures reinforced something Richie was already building toward. His mornings are not just nutritional, they are deliberately structured. He has described a daily morning skincare routine built around a cleanser, an exfoliant, and a moisturizer, which sounds simple until you factor in that he is also maintaining this routine on the road, in hotel rooms, across time zones, for months at a stretch. And in what may be the most unexpectedly specific health detail Richie has ever shared publicly, he told interviewers that part of his meditative process in hotel rooms is tweezing his mustache. Quote, "I spend so much time in a hotel room that part of my meditative process is tweezing. Tweezing is relaxing, period," end quote. Unusual? Sure. But what it actually describes is a man who has found small rituals that anchor him when the external environment is constantly changing. Then there is the physical toll that decades of performing took on his body in ways that were not always visible. Richie was a Commodore in the era of platform boots. The group performed in them. Night after night, show after show, they would jump from risers down to the floor and back again, wearing boots that put a kind of pressure and torque on the knees and ankles that he later described with something close to disbelief. Quote, "Since the Commodore's days, we don't wear those big boots anymore because of the knees and the ankles. I think about it now and think, what was I doing? Every night on stage, we jumped from one riser to the floor. Craziness," end quote. That craziness had long-term consequences. By the time he was in his early 60s, Richie was dealing with arthritis and significant hip pain. He quietly underwent a hip replacement around 2011, a surgery he has since described with something approaching amazement at modern medicine. Quote, "So everything about me now is brand new. I'm bionic. Well, no, not really, but the hip is better than ever and touring has been great. I don't even know I've got it," end quote. In 2017, a knee procedure forced him to postpone a joint tour with Mariah Carey. TMZ reported at the time that there was a pre-existing knee problem involved, and tour communications confirmed he was not 100% ready to return to the road. He came back. He always comes back. He also came back from something that was not physical at all, at least not on the surface. In September of 2025, Richie released his memoir, Truly, published by HarperOne. It reached number 3 on the New York Times hardcover nonfiction bestseller list and made additional bestseller lists in the United States and the United Kingdom. In it, he revealed something he had carried for most of his life without a name: an ADHD diagnosis. He described himself as a painfully, awkwardly, horribly shy boy who struggled with anxiety and undiagnosed attention deficit disorder. A child who could not focus and did not understand why. He was a system analyst's son who could not make his brain work the way systems are supposed to work. And he spent decades building workarounds before he finally had an explanation. The ADHD revelation did not come as a surprise to people who had paid close attention over the years. The meditation through tweezing, the structured morning rituals, the very deliberate compartmentalization between on-tour self and off-tour self. These are not the habits of someone who finds focus easy. These are the habits of someone who has spent a lifetime building scaffolding around a brain that needs more structure than most. All of which brings us to June 24th, 2026. The Sing-A-Song All Night Long Tour, a 26-date North American run co-headlined with Earth, Wind & Fire, opened that night at Grand Casino Arena in Prior Lake, Minnesota, just outside St. Paul. Approximately 10,000 people were in the building. Richie had been building toward this tour for months, and by his own account in tour communications, he was heartbroken when what happened next happened. About 55 minutes into the set, during Dancing on the Ceiling, one of the most physically demanding moments in his show, Richie sat down on a stage platform. He was still holding the microphone, he was still talking to the crowd, and what he told them, with the same self-aware warmth that has defined his public persona for 50 years, was this: "When you're feeling dizzy, sit your ass down." He performed 3 times a lady from the piano, seated, and then he told the crowd he needed a moment, walked off, and did not come back. About 40 minutes later, saxophonist Dino Soldo came to the microphone and informed the audience that Lionel Richie was not feeling well and would not be able to continue. Emergency personnel from the St. Paul Fire Department transported an adult male from the arena to a local hospital. The department's public information officer confirmed the transport but did not use Richie's name. Multiple outlets, including TMZ and Page 6, confirmed it was him. He was hospitalized as a precaution. The following morning, Earth, Wind & Fire drummer John Paris spoke to the Minnesota Star Tribune. His read on what happened was simple and direct. Richie was, in his words, a little dehydrated. Paris added that there had been no pre-show indication of any health issues and that he did not know Richie's official medical status at that point. Within 24 hours, Live Nation and Richie's team released an official statement. Under advisement by doctors to rest and return to full health, Lionel Richie has postponed his next 2 shows, the June 26th date at United Center in Chicago and the June 27th date in Columbus, Ohio. He was described as heartbroken to postpone, and the tour was scheduled to resume June 30th in Pittsburgh. Here is the thing about the word dehydrated. To anyone following Lionel Richie's wellness philosophy, it lands with a particular kind of irony. This is a man whose most repeated health message, across interviews going back years, centers on water. He drinks large amounts of it daily. He credits it with keeping his skin elastic. He talks about it as foundational to everything he does to maintain his body. And yet, on opening night of a 26-day tour, performing under stage lights in what touring veterans describe as intense heat, at 77 years old, his body ran short of the one resource he evangelizes most. Sports medicine specialists who work with touring performers will tell you that plain water is often not enough. Under sustained stage lights, a performer can lose significant electrolytes through sweat, and without proper sodium, potassium, and magnesium replenishment, even well-hydrated athletes can hit a wall fast. It is why touring dehydration protocols at the professional level now go well beyond water, incorporating electrolyte management and pre-show hydration loading as standard road warrior wellness practice. At 77, the margin for error on that equation is narrower than it was at 47. That is not a contradiction. That is a reminder that even disciplined systems have limits, and that the physical demands of doing what Richie does, 2 hours of singing and moving every night in a leather performance suit under thousands of watts of stage lighting, do not get easier with age. They get harder, and the margins get thinner. There is a quote Richie gave to interviewers at the Hollywood Beauty Awards that, in light of what happened in St. Paul, takes on a different kind of weight. He was talking about his anti-aging philosophy, and he said his formula for how he is held up is simple: water, sleep, and sweat, not too much red meat. And then he joked, and then he added the thing about sex being good for your heart. But what he said just before the punchline is the part worth sitting with. He said, "I know it's real boring," because it is. There is no secret supplement in the Lionel Richie wellness story. There is no celebrity nutritionist whose name we can drop, no exotic biohacking protocol, no procedure that explains the face that showed up at the Academy Awards and sent the internet into a spiral. There is a man who stopped eating ice cream before bed in his 40s because a holistic doctor told him it was destroying his voice, who built his touring diet around protein and oatmeal and strategic carbs, who drinks a glass of warm lemon water every morning, who works with a physical therapist, who uses his dermatologist products because he has sensitive skin and has for decades, who sleeps late after shows because that is when his body needs it. who refuses plastic surgery because, as he told the Daily Mail, God might not recognize me. That is the whole system, and it has gotten him to 77, to a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, to a memoir on the New York Times bestseller list, to 7 seasons on American Idol, to the opening night of a 26-day tour, 125 million albums, 50 plus years on the road, 4 vocal surgeries, and a holistic doctor who asked the right question, a hip replacement that he says he cannot even feel anymore, a knee procedure that slowed him for a season and then released him back to the road, an ADHD diagnosis that arrived decades late and finally named something he had been managing his entire life, and a dizzy spell at a piano in Minnesota, performing one of his signature songs in front of 10,000 people, handled the only way Lionel Richie knows how to handle things, out loud, in front of everyone, with humor and with grace. When you're feeling dizzy, sit your ass down. He will be back on that stage in Pittsburgh, and the boring, disciplined, specific routine that got him there in the first place will be the thing that gets him there again.